going to start a new project learning about mummies from ancient Egypt. Do you know what the word ancient means? It means something from a long, long time ago. These mummies were buried quite a long time ago. And I don't want you to be scared about what a mummy is. So in ancient Egypt, people lived just like you and I. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have cars, they didn't have grocery stores, but they did amazing things with what they had, and they were amazing artists as well. Almost everything they made was like a piece of art. A comb to comb your hair might have had pictures carved in the handle, a spoon to eat your soup with, a box to put everyday objects in. It might have all been beautifully made into a piece of art. Something else they believed was that in the afterlife, kind of like if you believe in heaven, people could go on living forever if they still had their body. So when someone unfortunately died or passed away, they made them into a mummy. That way they could go on living forever. So I don't want you to be scared of mummies. They're not anything scary. They're not going to hurt you. They're actually very interesting. I've been fascinated with them for quite a while. So I'd like to read you this book, The Valley of the Golden Mummies. It's about a boy who is very fascinated with ancient Egypt. His teacher gives him an assignment to write about something from history, and since he loves ancient Egypt, that's what he chooses. So it's someone who is about the same age as you writing this book, and there's lots of great pictures and facts. I wanted to share it with you now. The Valley of the Golden Mummies. Why I am writing about mummies. I'm writing my history report about mummies for 3 reasons. Reason 1, one time on vacation, I saw a mummy in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It was old and creepy, but it was interesting too. I have liked mummies ever since then. Reason 2, I broke my arm playing soccer. Now it is in a cast. The doctor wrapped it in cloth that gets hard. That is kind of like what happens with a mummy. Reason 3, since I couldn't play soccer with a broken arm, I watched TV instead. I saw a TV show about Egyptian mummies. So when my teacher told us to write a report, I thought of 3 things to write about. 1, mummies, 2, mummies, and 3, more mummies. And that's the boy who is writing the book. That's him right there. Striking gold. I used to think all the mummies in Egypt were found a long, long time ago. Surprise! Lots more mummies were found just a few years ago. It happened by accident. On March 1st, 1996, a man was riding his donkey through the Egyptian desert. The donkey stumbled into a hole. The man hopped off his donkey and looked into the hole. There was a golden mummy face peeking back at him from under the sand. He had struck gold, mummy gold. Mummy hunters. The mummy told archaeologists about the golden mummy. They rushed into the desert. When they started digging, they found more golden mummies. Soon, everybody started calling the place the Valley of the Golden Mummies. Archaeologists like to study how people lived a long, long time ago. They're special scientists. Archaeologists were excited to find the mummies. The mummies had been buried about 2,330 years ago. Luckily, their tombs had never been robbed in all the time since then. Most other Egyptian tombs were robbed way back in ancient times. What is a mummy? And that is the mummy of Egyptian pharaoh, and pharaoh means king, Ramses II. That's him in his, so inside the case, this is the actual mummy that's wrapped, and it does have a cloth over its body, but this is its head from the side. You can see its ear and its eye, and his hands are crossed. A mummy is a dead body that gets dried out so it won't rot. Bacteria like to make dead things rot. Bodies are made of about 2/3 of water. Bacteria like to grow in wet places, but if a dead body gets dried out, bacteria can't grow. A dried out body can stay almost the same for thousands of years. All wrapped up with some place to go. Why did ancient Egyptians make mummies anyway? It was an icky job that took a lot of time. I read lots of books, and here is what I learned. The ancient Egyptians believed there was life after death, an afterlife. In the afterlife, the spirit of the dead person could still enjoy all kinds of things, like eating, playing games, and going on boat rides. But to do this, the spirit needed its body, and a rotten body wouldn't do. That's why the Egyptians took so much time turning a dead body into a mummy, to keep it in good shape for the afterlife. What's inside a mummy's tummy? Oops. Not too far. It took ancient Egyptians 70 days to make a mummy. Here's how they did it. First, the wet, slimy guts were taken out. The intestines, stomach, liver, and lungs were each put in a special jar. Egyptians believed that people thought with their hearts, so the heart was left in the body. The ultimate nose picker. Back then, Egyptians didn't know what the brain was for. They stuck a long hook in through the mummy's nose to scoop the brain out. Then they just threw the mummy's brain away. Next, the body was covered in a special salt. It was called natron. Salt helps soak up wet stuff. After 40 days, the salt was cleaned off. The body looked dry and shrivelly now. Oil, tree sap, and wax were put on the body. This was to keep the body from getting wet again. The body was stuffed with sawdust or cloth to keep its shape. When the body was wrapped with strips of cloth, the strips of cloth went around and around the body like the bandages on my cast. The Egyptians put good luck charms called amulets between the cloth strips. Now the mummy was done. It was put in a coffin and was supposed to stay in its tomb forever. Mummy ABCs. Archaeologists think there may be 10,000 mummies in the Valley of the Golden Mummies. So far, they have found more than 100. They have a long way to go to find all of them. No one knows the names of the mummies, so archaeologists gave them nicknames like Mr. X, the Bride, Mummy A, Mummy B, and Mummy C. The archaeologists believe Mummy B was the wife of Mummy A. They think this because her head is turned, so she seems to be looking at Mummy A. They also found 2 child mummies in the valley. They nicknamed them the boy mummy and the girl mummy. Mummy B and the girl mummy are smiling. Not very many other smiling mummies have ever been found. I think their smiles look spooky, as if they have a secret they aren't telling. Gift wrapped in gold. Not all the mummies found in the valley had gold on them. Only rich people could afford that. The archaeologists found 3 main kinds of mummies in the Valley of the Golden Mummies. Poor and not so poor mummies. Mummies of poor people were wrapped in cloth strips any old way. Mummies of people with a little money were carefully wrapped in cloth strips. The strips were crisscrossed to make patterns and designs. Mr. X is this kind of mummy. Kind of rich mummies. Mummies of people with more money wore colorful painted masks on their face and chest. The masks were made of cloth dipped in plaster to make it stiff and hard. Mummy C is this kind of mummy. Rich mummies. The richest mummies got masks painted with bright colors too. Their masks were also painted with real gold. Some of the gold had jewels and carved pictures on it. The masks weren't solid gold. Only the kings, called pharaohs, were rich enough for that. But the masks still cost a lot. Mummies A and B are this kind of mummy. Mummies take a trip. When people heard about the Valley of the Golden Mummies, everyone wanted to visit. Archaeologists worried that if too many people came, they might get in the way of the work. So they sent mummies A, B, and C and the boy and girl mummies to a museum a few hours away. Then people could go to the museum to see the mummies and not bother the archaeologists. A mummy curse? After the mummies left, one of the archaeologists began having bad dreams. He dreamed about the boy and girl mummies who were at the museum. The boy and girl had been found next to each other in the Valley of the Golden Mummies, so they were probably brother and sister. A male mummy was next to them too. He was probably their dad. The dad stayed behind at the tomb. The archaeologists wondered if maybe the boy and girl mummies missed the dad mummy after they went to the museum. The archaeologists sent the dad mummy to the museum to be with the boy and girl mummies just in case. Guess what? The archaeologist's bad dreams stopped. Had his dreams been part of a mummy curse? More mummy curses. The idea of mummy curses began after the mummy of King Tutankhamun was found. His name was too long and too hard to say. That is why he got the nickname King Tut. King Tut's tomb was found in Egypt in 1922. It was full of golden treasure. That was the good news. The bad news was that some of the people working on the tomb had bad luck or got sick. It could be that old germs in the tomb made them sick. That's why archaeologists wear masks in tombs nowadays. But back then, people believed in the curse of King Tut. They thought he was mad because his stuff was being taken from his tomb. Maybe he was getting even. The weird thing is that lots of tombs really do have curses written on them. Ancient Egyptians wrote the curses to scare off robbers. A mummy moves in. Rich Egyptians wanted their mummies to have everything they needed in the afterlife, so they put things like furniture, games, money, and food in the tombs. They put in little statues of servants, too. The servants were supposed to work for the mummies in the afterlife. Mummy Dearest. Egyptians tried to make it easy for each spirit to find the right mummy in the afterlife. They put a face mask on each mummy that looked like the person when the person was alive. They wrote the person's name on the mummy or on the tomb walls. Egyptian writing was called hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics. They look like pictures of animals and objects. They can be written left to right, right to left, or top to bottom in a column. Lots of mummies. The mummies in Egypt were made on purpose, but sometimes a dead body gets turned into a mummy by accident. That happens when it gets buried in stuff that keeps it from rotting. Mummies have been found in bogs, ice, and deserts all over the world. Bogs are deep swamps filled with cold water. Bog water doesn't have bacteria, so things don't rot in it. One famous bog mummy is called Tolen Man because he was found in Tolen Bog in Denmark. The man died 2,400 years ago, but his mummy is in such good shape you can still see his whiskers. Cat mummies. People weren't the only ones made into mummies in ancient Egypt. Egyptians loved animals, especially cats. When they worshipped a cat, they even worshipped a cat goddess named Bastet. When a pet cat died, they usually made it into a mummy. Here's 2 mummy jokes. Why won't mummies watch scary movies? Think about it. Think carefully. Because they don't have the guts. Remember, they took their guts out to make them into a mummy? And yes, they say you have guts if you're brave. What kind of music do mummies dance to? Think about it. Rap music, because they're wrapped up. I hope you enjoyed this book. Okay, how to start your mummy. You will already get a pre-drawn outline to design. We're going to cut this out later. These are actually called a sarcophagus. So this is the case that would hold the mummy. The mummy would be inside with a mask on it that looked like the person. And they also made a face on the outside. It also looked like the person. But we want to make ours look fancy, like maybe we were royalty, a king or a queen with lots of jewels and carved pictures on it. Well, I'm going to begin with a pencil. That way, if I make a mistake, I can fix it. And I'm just going to start by drawing the face. I'm just going to keep the eyes real simple. If you want them to be closed, you can. That's fine too. The nose, I always just draw a really simple nose, just a little smile. And the mouth, remember, not many mummies were smiling, so I'm going to make mine pretty serious. You can make yours smiling if you want. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to give my mummy earrings. Going to design its chin piece. That usually meant that they were someone special if they had a chin piece on their mummy case, on their sarcophagus. Then the headpiece that goes around, I'm going to put some stripes on it so I can do different colors later. Okay. All right, and then I'm just going to keep designing the rest of my mummy case. Then you will want to continue adding designs. I'm going to make jewels and divide it into stripes and then add other shapes. So think about simple shapes, squares, circles, ovals, triangles that you could make look like jewels on your sarcophagus. You'll notice I made a stripe up and down the center. That's because later I am going to write my name in Egyptian hieroglyphics. These are Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's basically their alphabet. They used pictures for letters instead of letters. I will put this up on the screen afterwards in case you need to see it to see the letters. I'm going to write May for my last name down that center stripe. If you look for the letter you want, then you'll see next to it that there is a picture that represents that letter. M is an owl. Some of them are tricky to draw, just try your best. The A is a vulture, and the Y is two feathers. There are some missing letters. There's no E. I believe for that you would use an I, or a V. I think you would just use the F, the viper. For our next step, you are going to get a thin Sharpie and you're going to trace over all of your pencil lines very carefully. Take your time. The next thing that's a good idea to do is if you have any pencil marks that are sticking out from underneath the Sharpie, which happens to me a lot, you'll want to take your eraser on your pencil and try to get rid of those the best you can. You might not be able to get rid of it all. That's okay. Once you have all the Sharpie done and your lines erased, it's time to add color with crayons. You're going to use your crayons and color in your sarcophagus. Remember, these are jewels and carved pictures. We want this to look fancy. So take your time coloring. Make sure you're filling in the spaces, getting all of the white spots, taking your time. We're not scribbling or rushing to complete this. Now that I'm just about done coloring, it's time to cut this out. I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to cut out around the outside of the sarcophagus. I am going to leave a tiny bit of white around the outside. If you want to cut right on the line, that is also okay. Just be very careful. Now that my sarcophagus is cut out, I am going to glue it down to a black piece of paper. Before I do that, I just wanted to show you how I colored it in completely. Please make sure you did that. Flip over my sarcophagus, use my glue stick, not up too far. You do want to make sure you put quite a bit on here. Since it's a smaller piece of paper, it could curl. So please make sure you get all of the edges in the center with plenty of glue stick. Then place it on the black paper and smooth it out. Once it's smoothed out and placed, we are going to cut it out in the black paper. I'm going to leave a little bit of space between the sarcophagus paper and where I'm cutting so that some of the black paper is showing. So take your time going around the outside of the sarcophagus to cut it out on the black paper. Next, we're going to make a mummy out of torn pieces of paper to put on the back of our sarcophagus. So I'm going to tear a little pile. If you'd rather cut, that's fine too. So I'm just going to tear a little pile, that way they're all ready to go, and then I could do all my gluing at once. Now that I have a pile of torn paper, I'm going to turn my sarcophagus over and start gluing them down to make my mummy. If you need to tear more, that's fine. Just take my glue stick, put it on the paper, and start gluing it on the back. Keep gluing until you have the entire back filled. And there you have your finished mummy in its sarcophagus.